Chapter 9. Take 1. I woke up to the same sound of shouting and muffled cries I had heard before falling asleep. By the time I rose, got dressed, and went out to put on a pot of coffee, however, it was quiet again. Richard emerged first, looking furious. He poured himself some coffee and began mumbling aloud. It's like pulling teeth sometimes. Why do I have to put up with this? He muttered. She acts like she's doing me a favor. Let's get it straight. Who's doing who a favor here? He shouted toward the bedroom. What's wrong? I asked, and he spun on me. What's wrong? Everything's wrong. She drank too much as usual, thanks to you. And then she went off into one of her crying jags and kept me up all night. Finally, she passed out, and now she's miserable and hungover. Because of me? I asked, confused, but he ignored my question. She moans and fights me. She knows she has to get up and look good. My reputation is at stake here, he added, and shouting again towards Mommy's direction. She finally emerged wearing some sunglasses and walking with small, careful steps, like someone who was walking on eggshells. She went directly to the coffee pot. You can't wear those sunglasses all day, Gina. I told you to stop drinking 10 times last night if I told you once, didn't I? Didn't I? He asked furiously. I'll be fine, she said. Sure, you'll be fine. You'll look and act half dead, and then they'll fire you, and once again they'll blame me. Another market will be lost to me. And my clients, Richard exclaimed. Your other clients? She tried to smile, but that seemed to make her head ache because she immediately grabbed her forehead. Does anyone want anything to eat? I asked. Mommy didn't reply, but Richard turned away from Mommy and looked at me. No, and get dressed, he snapped. You have to go with us. I'm not coming all the way back here to pick you up. Your appointment is in West LA. Dressed? I am dressed. Put on something sexier. Don't you have a miniskirt or something? No, Go look in Gina's closet, he ordered. Mommy smiled. Yes, go do that, Melanie. Only don't wear one of my other bathing suits. She laughed. Oh, you're funny, Richard said. I have all the responsibility here. I'm the one putting his neck out, and it's about time I was appreciated. I mean it, he said sternly. She raised her sunglasses off her nose. Her eyes were bloodshot and very tired looking. I appreciate you, Richard. You have no right to say I don't. Well, if you're not in tip-top shape when I deliver you, you put me in a bad light, he said. He turned to me. Didn't I tell you to pick something out? We're behind schedule because it took me so long to get her out of bed. I gazed at Mommy. She lowered her glasses again and sipped her coffee. She hadn't even said good morning to me. I went into their bedroom. It looked like a war had been fought in their bed. The blanket was twisted, the sheet pulled up, one of the pillows on the floor. Mommy's clothes from last night were piled on her shoes beside the bed. I found a miniskirt and matching blouse in her closet and put them on. That's more like it, Richard said. You women have got to understand how to put your best foot forward when I bring you someplace, he lectured. It's not our feet they're interested in, Mommy quipped and then laughed. Very funny. Let's get moving, he ordered. He didn't give me time to clean up anything. I barely had time to turn off the coffee pot before he marched us out of the apartment, mumbling angrily behind us that we put pressure on him by taking so long to get ready. He's a slave driver, Mommy said loud enough for him to hear, but he's right. I'm lucky to have him looking after me. If he was looking after you, why did he let you drink so much? I asked her. She glanced at me, then stiffened. He didn't let me. You heard what he said in the kitchen. He tried to get me to stop. Why didn't you do it? I pursued. Because I'm not the hit of the party like you, Melanie. I'm not perfect. There's a lot worse than me around here, she added in a louder voice, mostly for Richard's benefit. I'm not perfect, Mom, sis, and I didn't go there to be the hit of the party, honest. It doesn't matter. Who cares with these losers who think around here anyway? Most of them will be gone in 6 months. You'll see, she said. I got into the rear of the car and Mommy got in the front. None of us spoke as Richard made his way through the city streets, cursing at the drivers, mumbling about the way they should be living in a nicer neighborhood by now. And I would be too, if only I got some sort of cooperation I need. I'm sorry, Richard, Mommy said, when we pulled into a small parking lot. I know I was a bad girl. Just try to do a good job in there. Important people come to this plaza, and someone could easily spot you. Remember what I told you. Exposure, exposure, exposure. That's the name of the game. Right. I'm sorry, she said, and leaned over to kiss him. He didn't soften much, but he kept his back straight and his eyes forward. I'll be back to check on you later, he said. It came out as a threat. Mommy turned to me before getting out. Good luck, honey, she said, and listen to whatever Richard tells you. I don't know what I'm doing, or... Will you get going, Gina? Richard offered. You're already a few minutes late. Yes, right away, she said, and left the car. Before I could get into the front seat, Richard started away. Where exactly are we going, I asked. Livewire Studios, he said. A friend of mine is doing us a favor by giving you a chance. But I don't understand. How do I start acting without a single lesson? The director teaches you everything you have to know right on the spot. It pays real well. We can make a half a year's rent in this one assignment if you do it right, he said. Half a year's rent, so much money, I thought, and it's dependent on me? That's right, and that's only the beginning. I've been telling your mother how good it could get if she goes off the bender like this and nearly ruins things time after time, he said. It hasn't been easy for me, no matter what you think. Maybe she's not really happy here then, I offered. He was silent. Why did you say it was my fault what happened last night? You outstaged her, he said, and Gina hates being upstaged. Especially by someone who's supposed to be her younger sister. Upstaged? But I didn't mean to do anything like that. Sure, he said with a smile, none of you women mean anything. It happens to be the truth, I snapped. I glared at the scenery. The buildings in the neighborhood began to look more seedy and run down. Where are we going? Finally, he made a turn into a driveway. I saw a building with something called an adult reading store in front of it. The driveway wrapped around behind it, and another building looked like it was attached to a garage, but above the doorway was a sign that read Livewire Studios. Here we are, Richard said. This is a studio? Most of the studios look like this, he explained. People who don't know Hollywood have this fantasy that it's glamorous to view it. It's just another warehouse and just another factory churning out of fantasy instead of shoes or chairs. That's all. Now remember, he warned, you're 21 years old. Oh, I told them you were in a small film back in West Virginia. What? It's nothing. Everyone makes up his or her resume here. The film is called Cherry Blossom. You play Cherry. What? Stop saying what, he ordered, turning around. Now don't tell them any more than what they need to know about you, and do what the director wants quickly, without questions, understand? You'll be here most of the day. I'll pick you up at 5. You're not coming in with me? I have other clients, other meetings, he said testily. I can't come here babysitting you. You want to be a movie star? This is how you start. I don't want to be a movie star, I said, gazing at the worn-looking doorway and the dull brown stucco building. I noticed there were no windows. So, you'll grin and bear it. Fame and fortune. I should be so unlucky. He opened my door. Come on, get going. I'll be right here at 5, he said, and stepped back. I got out slowly, too slowly for him. He reached in and pulled me by the arm. Will you get going, he said. Everyone has to do their part in keeping this operation going. You want to be with us? Earn your keep or go home, he threatened. Now, what's it going to be? I'm just going to make a fool of myself, I said. So what? Besides, he said with a sly smile on his lips, something tells me you won't make a fool out of yourself. In fact, you might just be a bigger star than your mother will ever be. And then you'll only have me to thank. He got in the car again and nodded at the studio door. The director's name is Parker, Lewis Parker. He turned the car around and drove off out into the yard, leaving me standing in front of the studio. I took a deep breath, swallowed back my confusion and fear, and went to the door. I opened to a dim, shallow hallway. There was a very tiny office to the right with papers piled on a small desk and stacks of what looked like scripts scattered on the floor. A poster of a woman clad in a see-through nightgown hovering over a man wearing handcuffs, was on the wall next to the desk. The poster read Sleepwalker. She was his best nightmare. I continued down the hallway to another door, above which was an unlit red light bulb. The words "Do not enter" when lit beneath it. I knocked on the door and waited, and then knocked again. Maybe there was no one here, I thought. It looked deserted. Suddenly the door was open and a curly-haired young black man in dungarees and a loose-fitting t-shirt greeted me. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Melanie Simone," I said, my voice cracking. "Oh yeah, good. Parker, the other girl is here," he called over his shoulder. "I'm Harris. Follow me," he said, turning back to me. "Get her in here," someone shouted from behind him, and Harris stepped back smiling. "Come on," he said. I entered slowly, and there were wires everywhere and lights on poles. I saw the cameras, and 3 of them were pointing towards what looked like a bedroom, and there was a cameraman adjusting some lights. A very buxom, platinum blonde-haired girl, who didn't look much older than I was, sat on the edge of the bed, her arms behind her as she leaned back and her breasts bare. She had a tattoo of what looked like a snake coming up and out of her cleavage. She wore nothing but a pair of flimsy panties, and she chewed bubble gum, blowing a bubble and snapping it before whipping it back with her tongue. I must have gasped out loud. The plump, bald-headed man spun around the chair. "Over here," he called. "I'm Lewis Parker. You're the girl Marlon sent?" "What's your name again?" he asked. I was still too stunned to speak. I shook my head instead. "Hey," he said, "we haven't got time to waste. I have to do 4 scenes and 2 setups today." When he rose from his chair, I could see he was very fat and wondered how he fit in that chair. He waddled rather than walked over to me and stopped, drinking me in from head to toe. A pleased smile spread like melted butter over his jowls and thick, fleshy lips. Because he was so heavy, his eyes looked small and sunken in his large head. "Marlon was right," he said. "A looker. Great." "Dolores," he cried, and the woman, who looked like she was in her 50s, but also had bleached blonde hair, wore lots of makeup and came out from behind the rack of costumes. "Get her dressed and on the set, will ya? Make sure she looks innocent. I like that. Good." "Yes, Lewis." She marched towards me. "Hello," she said. "Step over here. We don't have a dressing room." "Dressing room? Why would I need a dressing room?" Lewis Parker said, and Harris and his cameraman laughed. "We're all friends here." "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head and stepping back. The half-naked young woman sat up and suddenly took interest in me. "What is this? What kind of movie are you making?" I asked. "What's she talking about?" the woman asked, looking at Lewis Parker. "What is this? What kind of movie are we making?" "This is Livewire Studios," Lewis Parker said. "You're Melanie somebody, right? You were in a blue film before, something called, what's it called, Harris?" "Cherry Blossom." "She was the lead," Harris said. "Right, so you know what to do. We're on a tight schedule." Lewis Parker started back towards his chair. The cameraman looked away and stopped fiddling with the equipment. I shook my head and took another step back. "No, I don't do things like this," I said. "I never did." "What?" Mr. Parker spun around as quickly as his heavy legs allowed. "What do you mean you don't do things like this?" "I don't know what Richard told you, but I can't do this," I cried. "Hey!" I turned back and ran out the door and down the short corridor and burst out into the front parking lot. For a moment I stood there confused, undecided to which direction to take. Then I hurried down the driveway to the busy city street, my heart thumping. When I reached the sidewalk, I started in one direction and then another, unsure of my surroundings. I took a step off the sidewalk as cars whizzed by, and one driver blared his horn, sending me flying back, my stomach almost in my throat. Tears streaked down my cheeks. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Richard must not have known what kind of assignment he'd gotten me. He just couldn't have expected me to actually take that job. Get a hold of yourself, I ordered my frantic body. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the phone booth by the gas station across the street. I thought I might call Dorothy and ask her to have Spike come pick me up. This time I waited until the light changed and I hurried across to the booth and dug into my purse to find some change. It wasn't until I took off the receiver and started to put in the coins that I realized I couldn't call Holly's sister. Her husband would be furious with her, especially if she got involved in something like this. It wasn't fair for me to do this to her after all she'd done for me, I thought. But I didn't know where I was, and I had no way to get back to the apartment. I thought for a moment, then dialed the information and asked for Mel Jensen's phone number. There were 3 Mel Jensens, but I knew the right one when they mentioned Egyptian Gardens. I got the number and dialed. Someone picked up only after 1 ring. Hello? I'm looking for Mel Jensen, I said. Oh, the voice said, dripping with disappointment. Just a minute. Someone for you, I heard him say, and Mel got on. Hello? I'm sorry to call you, but I didn't know who else to call. My sister's working at the mall and... Melanie? Yes, I said. Where are you? I hear lots of traffic. I'm on a street corner. I'm lost and I don't know how to get back. And I thought, what's the address? Where are you? The address. I looked at the street sign and then read it to him. Okay, I know where that is. Wait right there, he said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thank you. After I hung up, I looked for a place to sit and wait, but there wasn't any benches around, so I went to the coffee shop on the opposite corner and sat at a counter. I ordered a cup of coffee, but barely sipped it, watching the clock. Within 15 minutes passed, I went out again and stood at the corner. While I was waiting, I saw a man I thought might have been Harris come out of the studio and disappear into the alley. Almost 10 minutes later, I started getting nervous. I heard a car horn and saw Mel. I was never happy to see anyone. He pulled over and I got in quickly. What the hell are you doing down here? He asked. I started to cry and sucked in my breath and told him. Marlon wanted you to be in an X-rated film? Some break, he said. They can make good money. I'm not saying he lied about that. Does your sister know? No. So you think Richard knew it was this kind of job? I asked. Are you kidding? Those jobs are right up Marlon's alley. Well, you did the right thing walking out like that. These things come back to haunt you when you get decent work and become a star. I'm not gonna become a star, any kind of star. That's not why I came here, I protested. Wouldn't anyone believe me? Why did you come here? Just to visit, I said. After a moment, I added, but now that I'm here, I hope I can talk my sister into coming back home with me. Mel laughed. I don't know your sister that well, but she looks like she's been bitten, just like the rest of us. Don't get your hopes up. Now that I was in his car and we were driving away from the Livewire studios, I swallowed back my panic and felt my heart stop pounding. Thank you so much for coming to get me, I said. You sounded terrific. I borrowed my roommate's car. I don't have a car myself. Oh, it was nice of him to lend it to you. Yeah, so why'd you leave the party so quickly last night? I was feeling exhausted. You didn't see how dirty my sister's apartment was and how much work I did. He laughed. I bet. She's no Susie Homemaker, huh? No, she never was. What, did your parents spoil her? My father did, I said. It wasn't such a lie, I thought. He and I ended up doing most of the work, even the cooking. What about your mother? She died when we were very young, I said. Oh, sorry. I can't believe that Richard wanted me to do that, I muttered, still half in shock. It doesn't surprise me. To a manager or an agent, it's easy money. I have to find some other way to earn money while I'm here, I moaned. I can always get you a job at the supermarket, he said, half kidding. Could you? You'd like that? I'll do anything, but Richard was trying to get me to get a job, I replied. Okay, I'll see about it. I'll take you somewhere for something to eat, but I have to get to work. I have an afternoon shift today. That's all right. You've done a lot for me already. How about paying me back by going to dinner with me later? How's that paying you back? I asked, laughing. I like your company, he said and smiled. Well, I'll be out at 6:30. We can go at around 7 if you want to go to Italian. I know a great little place only 2 blocks south of us. Okay, I said, but I should be taking you out. I wish I could afford to. Don't worry about it. It's my treat. I thanked him again, and we arrived at the Egyptian gardens. After he dropped me off and hurried up to the apartment and quickly changed out of Mommy's miniskirt and blouse, I put on my own clothes. I was calm enough to make myself some lunch and settle down. I did some more cleaning and kept my mind off what had happened and spent the remainder of the afternoon reading Mommy's movie magazines on the patio. A little after 5, I heard her and Richard come in. I got off the lounge and entered the apartment to meet them. Richard stood there with his hands on his hips, glaring at me furiously. Mommy looked almost as angry, her hands clenched in fists at her side. What did you do, Melanie? Mommy asked softly. What did you do to Richard? What did she do to me? I'll tell you what she did, Richard said, stepping forward before I could offer any response. She put a nail in my coffin here. She hurt my reputation and completely destroyed a lucrative market for me. I had 3 other girls set up to get jobs at the Livewire studios, and they canceled all of them. You lost all those girls' money, and they needed it badly, he said. I'm not even counting my lost commissions. Melanie, how could you do this? Mommy, you don't understand, I cried. There, he screamed, his forefinger jabbed at me. She keeps forgetting. She'll call you Mommy in front of these people. Melanie, I've pleaded with you not to call me Mommy. I know, I'm sorry, I said. I'm just upset. I won't forget anymore. I took a deep breath and did what he told me to do. I went into the studio, and there was half-naked women sitting on the bed. They wanted me to be in this movie. So, Mommy said, Richard told you how much money you were going to make. I bet it's twice, if not 3 times, what Kenneth paid you to model naked for him, she added. I felt my heart stop and then start racing. The blood seemed to drain from my face. I tried, but I couldn't speak for a moment. The lump in my throat was hard as a rock, unmovable. What? You get undressed for only certain men when you feel like it, Richard quipped. When I get you a job where you can help us, you decide to be Miss Prim and Proper. You run out of the studio and make me look like a fool of the year. Sis, that was different. What Kenneth was doing was art. You know that, I finally said, unable to believe she didn't see the difference. A lot of people think this is art too, Melanie. You have to have understanding, and you can't be a snob, she said. A snob? But sis, they wanted me to get undressed and be in bed with this other woman, and what of it? I've done it, she said. You have? I asked, not wanting to believe her. Of course. How do you think we got the security and the first month's rent for this place? You know how much money that is? And I got it with just 2 days of work, she said proudly. I just shook my head in disbelief. You can't stay here without earning your keep, Richard insisted. We're not running a shelter for the homeless. I'll earn something. Mel Jensen says that he can get me a job at the supermarket. The supermarket? That's what you want to do? Yes, I'd rather sweep floors and stack groceries forever than do what that fat man wanted me to do. Well, you raised a pretty smart girl, Richard said to Mommy. Supermarket wonder. Great. In the meantime, you can keep this apartment spotless and see to our laundry. If you won't be a movie star, then you'll be a servant. Maybe that's all you're capable of being. I looked at Mommy for support, but she just nodded. Richard's right, honey. With the 3 of us now, we won't be able to afford a housekeeper or the dry cleaners if you don't work where Richard wants you to work. I don't mind doing the cleaning and looking after the laundry, I said. Surely Mommy didn't fully understand what Richard was doing to her and what he had done to me. We're the ones exposing ourselves, embarrassing ourselves, lowering our self-respect, and he's the one collecting the money for it. I had to make her understand, and if it took having me be someone's little slave for a while in order to do so, I thought so be it. Good, Richard said, marching out of the living room to the bedroom. Sis, you don't know how terrible that place was. You couldn't have done something like that. Don't be stupid, Melanie. You can't be a child anymore. You're here. Make the most of it. Take advantage. You have a built-in manager and agent. Do you know how hard it is to find talent and get representation? Talent? What kind of talent does it take to strip off your clothes and do an X-rated things in front of a leering cameraman? You'd be surprised, Mommy said. The camera doesn't lie. If you're not sincere when you perform, the camera will expose you. Oh, you're exposed all right, and then some. Sis, listen, I said. But Richard came marching back into the living room, his arm full of shirts and pants and a few pairs of shoes on top. See to it that these are washed and ironed. We can't afford the laundry, and I want these shoes polished so I can see my face in them. I've got to look twice as good now that you screwed things up. And he dumped everything at my feet. I looked from the pile to Mommy, but she just turned and walked into the bedroom. Of course, Richard said softly after she was gone, if you want to turn around and go back to Cape Cod. I glared at him with hot tears in my eyes, and then I started to scoop up his clothes. Not yet, I said. I haven't finished what I came here to do. He saw the firmness in my face, and his smile evaporated. Just watch yourself, he said. You're playing out of your league, and you're playing on my turf. I'm not playing, I replied, and began to take everything into my room. An hour later, while I was ironing Richard's shirts, Mommy poked her head into the room to tell me they were going out to dinner. We can't afford to take you, honey, she said. I'm sure you'll find something for yourself here. Someone's taking me to dinner, I said softly, not looking up at her. Oh, who? Mel Jensen, I said. When I looked up at her, I saw a look of surprise on her face. Really? Well, you be careful, she said. Watch what you say and what you tell him. Men can get you to trust them too much too fast, she warned. I suppose you'd know, I said. Her back straightened and a sharp look came to her eyes. Don't be disrespectful, Melanie. I'm not, I'm just... Sis, when can you and I sit down and have a real conversation? When can we be like we used to be, just for a little while? I don't know, she said a little sadly. I don't know if we ever can. That's why it might have been better for you not to come looking for me, Melanie. I'm sorry, she said. I just don't know. We stared at each other for a moment, then she returned to the living room and left with Richard. My heart felt as if it sank, like a chunk of coal in my stomach. I sat on the bed and buried my face in my hands, choking on dry sobs. Billy Maxwell was so right when he said people change because of where they are and what they're doing. He warned me to expect Mommy might be a very different person. But was she different? Perhaps she was the same woman she'd always been, but the woman I had refused to permit myself to see. I took a deep breath and sat up straight, wondering what I should do. Should I just leave and try to forget I had a mother? Or should I remain and do battle with her fantasies and her phony knight in shining armor? How would I ever get her to listen to anything I had to say? I was in such confused and troubled state of mind, I forgot all about Mel until he came knocking on the door. Ready? He asked when I opened the door. Oh, Mel, I forgot. I'm sorry. I looked at myself wearing an apron over dungarees. I'll be just a minute, I said. Come on in. I rushed into the bedroom to pick out something to wear. I hurried in the bathroom, brushed my hair, and put on some lipstick. Mel sat on the sofa laughing as I paraded back and forth. It's all right, take your time, he called. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes and tried to calm my nerves before appearing before him again. Viola, he said, standing, remarkable metamorphosis. You look great. I don't feel great, I moaned. He opened the door and stepped back so I could pass. So tell me, how did Marlon take your not going through with his assignment? He asked. He was furious. He said I hurt his reputation. I bet, not to mention his pocketbook. I was offered those kind of films too. You were? Sure. A lot of would-be's think that's the way to get into business, and unfortunately they get taken advantage of. This is a tough place, a city with sharp teeth that devours the pure of heart, he remarked. Then why do you stay? I asked. It's where it's at, he replied with a shrug, and I'm not so pure at heart. He put his arm around mine and led me out of the complex. The restaurant was small and cozy, just as he had described, and the food was delicious. Mel talked about himself, telling me about his home and his family, and every time he asked me questions, I had to check myself to make sure that I wasn't saying anything to give away all of Mommy and Richard's lies. I tried to say as little as I could. Finally, he sat back and narrowed his eyes. Getting you to talk about yourself is like pulling teeth. Why is that? I don't know, I said, shifting my eyes down quickly. He continued to stare. Are you really just visiting, or did you run away from home? He pursued. I raised my eyes and smiled. Run away from home? What makes you think that? I've met a number of runaways, and they act a lot like you, evading, giving only bare minimum when asked a question. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm just visiting, I said, and he laughed. Fine. I am. Why was it that every man I met could be so infuriating, thinking that they were better than me, and they knew me better than I knew myself? They've got great spumoni, he said, and ordered some for us. I hate to see you spend your money on me, I told him, calming down slowly. I know how hard it is for you. That's okay. Actually, I asked you out both to be with me and to have you celebrate with me. I got the part in the theatrical production that will open in 2 months. I had auditioned for them so long ago I forgot about it and wrote it off. But out of the blue, my agent received a call and called me just before I went to pick you up. Congratulations, that's wonderful, Mel. I expect you'll be in the front row of opening night, he said. Now he continued, turning more serious. What this means, I realized, was I was to give up my job at the supermarket. I spoke to the manager this afternoon and told him I had someone responsible to take my place. He thought it was fine. So congratulations to you. You'll get your job in about 3 more days, if you really want it. Good, I said. Now Richard won't be able to complain about me. Thank you. Of course, I think you should aim higher. You have talent and you look great, he said, but you've got to want it, be hungry for it. But I don't want it, I said, and he stared at me with that curious smile on his face. Maybe that's what intrigues me the most about you, he said. What? Your ability to resist temptation, your lack of ego. You're just the type who succeeds, he added. I looked at him, at that impish grin on his face. It amazed me how other people saw things in me I never saw in myself. After we walked home, Mel asked me if I wanted to come up to his apartment. We could listen to some music. My roommates are out for the night. I don't know, I said. I promised my sister I wouldn't stay out late. It's not late, he insisted. I'd like to dance for you, too. Dance? Sure, I'll show you what I did at the audition for the show, okay? It sounded interesting, so I agreed, and we went up to his apartment. You'll have to excuse the mess, he warned at the door. Remember, 3 guys live here. It didn't look anywhere near as cluttered and dusty as Mommy's apartment had been when I first started to clean it, I told Mel, and he laughed. Want something to drink? More wine, perhaps? I suppose wine's all right, I said, and he poured me a glass. After he did, he went to the bedroom and put on his dancing clothes. I heard the music first, and then suddenly he leaped in the room, wearing the tightest top pants I'd ever seen, so tight they left nothing about him to the imagination. He spun on his toes, lifted his legs so high I lost my breath, especially when he did it right in front of me. The music became faster, the beat harder. He mixed it with ballet steps and slides and turns that were dazzling. Finally, he stopped and stood before me, breathing hard, his face flushed with excitement. I felt flushed from the wine and his performance. Well, You're wonderful, I said. I can't imagine you not succeeding. He laughed and stepped closer. The music continued, softer and slower. He reached out to take my hand. I started to shake my head, but he pulled me harder until I stood and we were dancing cheek to cheek, his hard, fast breathing on my neck. When I caught sight of us in the reflected window, it looked like I was dancing with a naked man. My own breathing quickened, and his slowed, and then he smiled and kissed me softly. I felt him push against my thighs. You're so sweet, he said. I really like you. He kissed me again, but I didn't let his lips linger on mine. I stepped back, bowing my head, and when I looked down at him and saw how excited he was, I felt my heart flutter and my breath grow short. I've got to get home, I said. Melanie. He stepped towards me. I really do, Mel, please. Okay, he said. I don't force myself on anyone, but I hope you like me. I do, but not that way. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sure there's lots of girls who would love to be up here with you, I added. He smirked. Very few like you. Okay, I'll give it time, he said. Consider this my first audition. Maybe you'll give me a call back, okay? I laughed and tried to shift my eyes from his very revealed body. I found my purse and headed toward the door. If you wait for me to change again, I'll walk you home. No, that's all right. Thanks for dinner. I'll call you about the supermarket job, he said. Thanks. I hurried out the door, and when I looked back, I saw him standing there smiling at me. I waved and descended the stairs, feeling as if I were fleeing. But was I fleeing from him or from myself? For the first time, I thought I was really more afraid of my own weakness and desire. This was a place filled with many different kinds of temptations. The Egyptian gardens might as well have been the Garden of Eden, I concluded, and half expected a snake to come up and whisper in my ear as I crossed the courtyard into our building, made up the way to our apartment. The phone was ringing when I entered. I hurried to it. Hello? And I heard a deep breath, and then, where were you? Carrie asked. I was out to dinner, Carrie. What's wrong? Dad's dead, he said. He had another heart attack in the CCU and he died. He laughed strangely. I couldn't think of anyone else to call, but you were out to dinner. Carrie, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, it won't be the wrong person in his grave, will it? Carrie, I'm tired. It's late here. I ran down to the docks, and when I came home, I just stood there looking out at the ocean and thinking about the trips he and I had made together. Funny, he said huskily. Now you and I are both without fathers. I'll be back as soon as I can, Carrie, I promise. Okay, he said in a small voice, and then he hung up and left me crying for both of us.